is New York really worth it? I was just here for 6 months, and that was a big adjustment. There were times where I was just like really sad, like crying, like what am I doing in New York City? Like I miss my family. I didn't leave all my friends, family, belongings behind to blend in as someone working a job. I really came here to push against my limiting beliefs, challenge myself, and draw outside the lines of my comfort zone. If you're able to identify something like that, that's a pretty strong why of I can do this.
Welcome to A Curious Corner, where we unravel the stories behind our guests through the lens of curiosity. In today's episode, I'm joined by Ezra Fuller, who works for a social team at VeeFriends and is the author of a weekly newsletter, The Bleeding Edge. Welcome, Ezra. How are you doing?
Doing good. Here in the VaynerMedia office, the VeeFriends office, on a Saturday.
Well, thanks for coming on. And really, if it wasn't for you, this podcast might not exist. Obviously, you've started a newsletter. Actually, I saw that it's nearly coming up to a year, so congrats on nearly being a year. Probably by the time this episode goes out, it will officially be in a year. But I was inspired by one of your articles that I read in your newsletter, The Bleeding Edge. And from there, this is where the podcast idea sparked from. And I feel like after reading it, you reignited the spark within me. So naturally, it felt right that I had to have you on as the first guest. So thanks for agreeing to come on.
Thank you. I didn't know that. Which newsletter was it? Was it the 3 method?
Yeah, it was a 3 method. And it's actually, ironically, it's the one I've spoke about most to other people. Like, every time I've mentioned the podcast, I've then mentioned the 3 method, and it's probably 10 people I've mentioned it to of saying this. I've done this article and done this task basically. And,
tell people the 3 method from your perspective, because I could easily talk about it, but I'd love to hear you.
So, the 3 method. So Ezra wrote an article in his weekly newsletter called about a 3 method. The 3 method is broken down into 3 pillars. First pillar is, what are your passions? What are your interests? What are things you could talk about forever and just keep talking, right? Second pillar is, what are your skills? What's your knowledge or skills, etc. And then the final pillar is, what do you find spiritually rewarding? And it's a combination of matching those passions and interests to your skills, and then coming up with some concepts around those. And then once you've completed that, then making sure that all those concepts then tie into your spiritual side and is spiritually rewarding. Because naturally, people have a lot of great ideas and say, oh, I'm going to start this, I'm going to start that. But if you don't have a bigger reason behind it and a why, and I think naturally, if it's spiritually rewarding, for me, I want to continue to connect with, like-minded people. I want to have better conversations. I want to feel like I'm continuing to grow. And there's a lot of things, right? But essentially, if you have that why behind it, then you've got a lot more chance of being consistent and actually continuing with it versus, just kind of dipping your toes in and then after a week, you're on to the next thing. So that's important. But that's my interpretation of a 3 method.
Yeah, I mean that's basically spot on. And you literally did the whole step by step of how it's laid out in the newsletter too. So I found that method. That's the reason that I started the newsletter, was the 3 method. I sat down last year, January 2nd of 2023, and I was already too late for a New Year's resolution. The new year was already in, but I was man, I was kind of anti New Year's resolution, just to be cool and go against the grain. But I think it's very helpful to do that kind of thing. And if you're not going to set a goal or, a New Year's resolution, at least setting intentions for what you want to get done. So I had already been journaling a little bit. I would write in a journal just to put thoughts down on paper, because to me, you have to solidify your thinking. You get to a more concrete idea by writing it down and journaling it through, because you can you can poke your own holes into it, and your thinking has to be sound when you write. So I wrote a little journal of what the hell do I want to do this year? And I don't know where I found this method. I don't know if I came up with it. I'm sure I'm not the first person to do this, but I just sat down and the 3 columns are what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and then your skill set. And you just throw everything you can for 30 minutes. Just spend 30 minutes to 60 minutes. Even when you can't think of anything else, just stay there, stay with it, and just keep throwing ideas into those columns. And then after the time limit, after 60 minutes, sit back and then just see what sticks out to you. Like, what categories can you do that are within all three of those buckets? Because just like you said, if it's all three of those, and especially if it's spiritually rewarding, it's not gonna be that hard to keep with it. Like, in today's world, there's so many distractions and things that are like competing for your attention that you're not going to be able to do something if you don't really enjoy it. Otherwise, you're going to pick up your phone and just be like, oh, let me just check TikTok, for 2 hours. And then you lost 2 hours. But yeah, I sat back and I realized that, what I like and what I'm passionate about and what would be spiritually rewarding is basically a podcast in newsletter form, because a podcast is just putting your thoughts out, and connecting with people. So I wanted to get better at writing because that's really a big skill set, to have. And I think, a lot of people don't spend time writing. So if you're a good writer, you're already in like a smaller category, which means that you can go farther than most people. So I'm really excited to hear that the three method that's the reason I started the newsletter. And then the newsletter helped you start a podcast through the same method.
Yeah.
It's just really fun. And that's why it's spiritually rewarding, because now this is your first episode, right?
This is the first
First
episode.
one. So like, it doesn't really get more poetic than that. That was a year ago. I did the three method January 2nd. It's now December 30th, almost a year to the day. So that's exciting. And people might not believe this, but we're not related, even though we have the same last name and look very similar.
It'll be
I had to
good.
throw that in there.
Yeah, I know. It is quite funny. Maybe there'll be like in 10 years' time, there'll be like the episode of like trying to track like a family link in between, going back to 1500s. And
Yeah,
yeah.
both in
So
Ireland or something.
yeah, all
No, I
good.
had to throw that in there.
No, it's funny. I think about that quite a lot. First main question is, what does someone listening to this need to know about your childhood to understand the person who you are today?
That's a great question. Did you use ChatGPT for that?
No, actually, that came off the top of my head, but ChatGPT might have been used a bit in some of
No,
these.
that's a great question. Um, what do people need to know about my childhood to understand? I think, well, I just visited my hometown named Weberville, um, and there's 2,000 people in that town. It's a farm town, lots of empty space, and I had went and visited it since living in New York City. I've lived here for about a year. I visited the city for the first time in a while, and I brought my girlfriend, and that was the first time she had seen Weberville too. So I was almost seeing my hometown through, a beginner and a newcomer's eye. So it's very small, and because it's pretty small, like the generations have stayed there over and over again. So there was kind of like a do whatever it takes attitude. Like, if you wanted to, if your truck broke down, you had to fix it, because it wasn't like there was a ton of money going around. It's not like there was a lot of wealth. So if a problem came up, you had to be the one to solve it. I think that's the main thing, is like, I really learned to, I guess, handle problems. Or, you know, literally when my car broke down, I didn't know anything about cars, but I had to learn. Otherwise, I couldn't drive and go to my friend's house or go to the store or do whatever. So that kind of put me in a position to, kind of be okay putting the hard work in. Um, Although that didn't come until I was like 17. I was kind of like pretty lazy up until, I had to get a job. And then it was like same kind of attitude doing construction. Um, and the other thing I think is my parents had me when they were young. I believe my mom was just turning 21 and my dad was just turning 22 when they had me. And again, it wasn't like they had a lot of money rolling around. So it was a lot of just do whatever it takes, make it work. Um, and then they had, four more kids. So I'm the oldest of five siblings. And, that takes a lot of money to raise a family that big. So my dad would just like, I sometimes wouldn't see my dad for, a couple weeks, because he'd go up north in Michigan and just, there was a job that paid overtime, paid extra. It was all within the same company, but he'd have to go and stay, in a cabin for like 3 weeks at a time. And he would just do that because he had to. So I, and then the third thing is, I don't know where get a curiosity from. I don't know where I get like innate curiosity of just wanting to find um, out how things work, which I think is part of the curious corner here. Um, I was really thinking of that yesterday. I'm like, where did I get this curiosity to and general willingness to be wrong? Sometimes I can be stubborn. You know, I'm human. I still sometimes I don't like to be wrong, but for the most part, I'm pretty open to new ideas. Um, and I was trying to think of how that came to be, but really, I'm not quite sure where that came from. So yeah, it was my childhood all wrapped up. Pretty humble beginnings. I had a handful of close friends. There was a graduating class of like 60 kids, usually 40. We had a big class at 60. Um, yeah, and I'm a nerd too, but I'll pause there. I
Fair.
like computers and computer science and all that.
There's definitely like a common theme like throughout everything you do is like curiosity led and driven. I wonder like maybe if being like the oldest, as you say, of like four other siblings, where maybe if you're the oldest, maybe your parents were like, oh, he's the oldest, you know, he can kind of look after himself a bit, and we'll worry about the younger ones. Like I don't know, I'm just kind of like maybe potentially, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's
I
cool.
I think it's the opposite. Like the oldest is like, um, for the most part, it's like the parents don't want to make a mistake, so it's like kind of like babying and like making sure. Oh, like I didn't get an email address until I was like 13. I remember wanting an email address so that I could like message my classmates after school and like try and get the attention of my crush or whatever. But my mom was like, "No, you can't get an email address." And then, you know, my siblings got phones and email addresses like way earlier than I did. Um, yeah,
Fair.
so I think it's the opposite there. But at the same time, my parents were so young that they were kind of just like, um, my mom was like, "Yeah, we, you know, your grandma would watch you, and we'd go out to like parties and stuff." Because they were like my age when I was 5 years old. Like I can't imagine like you got to have some fun as a 25-year-old, you know. So
Yeah.
it was still a little bit loose, and my mom always let me do basically whatever. Like going to a friend's house, she's like, okay, be safe, but didn't want to be like a super controlling mom. So I think that is kind of what you're saying. There's a bit of freedom there, depending on the parenting style.
With your background being in such like a small, I guess like farm town almost, uh, do you think that's part of the reason like you speak in your newsletter about when you're maybe in your teenage years of having this lone wolf mentality? Maybe like explain a bit what you mean by that for any listeners that are not sure what that means exactly. But then, uh, yeah, do you think that's where that comes from?
Um, I'm not sure where that comes from. I remember writing. It's called "There's a Bad Ending for the Lone Wolf," something along those lines is what it's called, and I remember like there was a period like a couple months ago, like July through September, where I was a bit more in like a journaling mindset. Like I was really trying to figure it out for myself because I was just here for in New York City for 6 months, and that was a big adjustment. Like there were times where I was just like really sad, like crying, like what am I doing in New York City? Like I miss my family, um, and maybe that's where the lone wolf the lesson of there's a bad ending for the lone wolf. Like, no matter how strong you think you are, like you're gonna need some kind of backup. Like the wolves hunt in a pack, you know, and they look after each other, and that's kind of like in the modern day, it's not as aggressive. You know, we're not like out hunting together like humans used to even just hundreds of years ago. Now we're kind of like we just have this camaraderie and um, I mean, humans are extremely social, and I heard a thing where recently on a podcast they said humans are not truth-seeking creatures; we're story-seeking creatures. So we'll even just like get together around the campfire and tell stories. Like they don't need to be true, and we'd prefer them not to be true because then we have to like realize with wrestle with the fact that we're not perfect and our shortcomings are like right there if we're constantly telling the truth. Um, And so we're very social and we need to communicate with other humans. I'm not sure exactly where the lone wolf mentality came from. I think it was that I was trying to do things on my own here in New York City. New city, I only had a couple of friends. I mean, people in the office are like my best friends. Um, but that's about it. I think I was reading a pot or listening to a podcast or reading something that sparked that, but I don't know the exact origin. Um, but just like what we're doing, we carved out time out of our schedules to talk to each other, and and then the listener, instead of being on what TikTok or whatever, they're listening to us talk. So that's the social aspect of it as well.
More, I didn't even realize it at the time, but after that, and maybe before like this podcast episode, I had the realization that there was actually a time in my life when I was also a lone wolf, and it was related to my last job, I think, because the last job I had, I didn't enjoy it, and I was quite young compared to like everyone else around me, and therefore I think naturally I had a bit of a lone wolf mentality and just like, um, yeah, just kind of like doing it on my own type thing. Um, but
It's kind
naturally
of
that's not the
lonely.
case anymore, which is good.
Yeah, that's
Um,
good. Yeah, you got the
yeah,
new job. You moved. Yeah.
yeah, as you kind of mentioned earlier, say through starting the newsletter, almost just become your like public journal. And actually, I feel like maybe this is intentional because you speak about it quite a bit anyway. But it always seems like throughout different phases of your life, you've left a public journal. I guess in certain mediums, like sometimes it's writing, sometimes it's imagery, sometimes it's videos. Um, So I guess like naturally, for someone like myself, it made maybe it made my job quite easy, maybe too easy. But like one of the things you've done was the daily poster project, which I find very interesting, where you made a piece of digital art each day for a year and a half, which is quite an achievement. Um, and I think again you've spoke about it in the newsletter, and you said as a way of being creative, having that freedom, being a way to express yourself with what you were experiencing during that time. So I was curious to know what were you experienced during that time, and what did you discover about yourself from that?
So first of all, thank you. The daily posters, that's a deep dive. Not many people know about the daily posters. Um, so at the time, it was late 2019, and I was working at a real estate company, and I really learned everything from how a camera works to video editing to coming up with a strategy for a social media channel. Like I learned basically everything that a beginner needs to know on the job at that real estate company. And so I was really like putting in hours, like 10 to 12-hour days at that real estate company for months and months on end. And I kind of got burnt out. And I was like, you know what? I want to learn something for myself. Like I need to exert effort in a way that is both for myself and teaches myself a new skill that will be useful whether I decide to stay at the company or go beyond. And I had always known in my heart and soul that I was going to work for GaryVee one day. That was like my big life goal. And learning how to do Photoshop um, through these daily posters. The daily posters were like photographs, illustrations, 3D models, just like anything that involved the Adobe Creative Suite. I would try and learn this skill and share something cool in an artistic way. So that all kind of um, vertically integrated as I learned, and as I did that, I got closer in my head to getting to a place where I could work for GaryVee. So um, that's kind of what it was, and I thought that it would be really cool as one of the first generations that is part of the internet, at least the social media scale of the internet, to kind of document what I was feeling and what I was going through. And going through could be positive or negative. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. Just like what I was experiencing as a human. I wanted to share that because if we are one of the first generations, like me, you, the viewers right now are part of the first generation that has access to the internet. We can, for the first time at scale, be the generation that can tell their own story, like from the first person view. Um, and so I wanted to do the daily poster project, and honestly I wanted to prove to myself that I could do something consistently. Like I was kind of a bit lost in terms of like my direction in life. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't super confident in myself as a human, as a person. I was like, you know what, if I could just do this every day for a year, then I would prove to myself that I'm capable of doing what I put my mind to. And so the first 7 days, I didn't say anything publicly. I just posted something every day for 7 days within this, a graphic design that I learned through Photoshop. And then after this, the eighth day, I said, okay, I proved to myself that I could do it for 7 days in a row. Now I'm not getting ahead of myself. And now I can publicly say that I'm going to do this for 365 days. And that's kind of, I think that's important too, with for someone that has big ambitions. Like, people don't want to be told, they want to be shown. And especially people that you want to connect with who are at a higher level, like people that you aspire to be and be around, they've put in the work and they know that they need to be shown and not told what you're going to do. So I think that that's important. Like, for the newsletter, I didn't, I told myself that I was going to do it once a week. And then after doing that a couple times, I'm like, that's a cadence. I can now confidently tell people that that's what's going to happen because they can see that that's what's been happening. And I believe there's some science to, if you tell someone your goal, then it releases a high percentage of the dopamine that you would get if you just hit the goal. So it's almost like just saying your goal out loud and telling someone is as satisfying as hitting the goal. And so I like to avoid that. And then that just leads into, you lose confidence in yourself because you didn't get the goal, especially because you told someone that you're going to get it. And now they know that you're a quote unquote failure. That's how these internal dialogues turn into you being not as confident in yourself. So that's the daily posters.
That's
And
fair.
they're,
I also feel very like if you like I've something I've experienced as well is like the more people where I'm mentioning like, oh, I'm thinking of like trying to start a podcast, and it's like it keeps me accountable, right? Because I've just said I'm going to do it. I don't want to like take my reputation like throw it in the bin, right? Like I want to, or a trash can. Like I want to do what I'm saying I'm going to do, and like stick to it, and be disciplined, and also be disciplined to myself and have our own self worth. So yeah, it's cool. You mentioned with Emma posters, like you just basically done it, and then after you done it consistently, you started it. Like you're not afraid to like put stuff out there, and like naturally like videos, newsletter, images, whatever it is. Like you're not afraid to post it, or at least that's like how it seems. And obviously, we live in a world where majority of people are like paralyzed by the fact of like posting anything because what's their best friend going to say, what's their boss going to say, etc., etc. So was wondering if you had any insight into like how you give yourself permission to pursue and express your creativity.
I think there's a lot of people that don't like the sound of their own voice, right? And what does that stem from? I think it stems from, what are other people going to think? Like, oh, they know that my voice sucks because I think my voice sucks. It's like, people aren't really thinking about you the way that you think about you. Um, and so if people are going to like talk behind your back, like that's what humans do, first of all. So give a little bit of leeway to, if people are going to talk about you in a negative light. One, that's kind of how social animals behave. Oh, there's a thumbs up. That's how social animals behave. And then two, if they're constantly doing that and like putting you down, then you don't, and then you hear about it, then you know that that's not someone you want to associate with anyways. So because they're at a different point in their lives where they don't want to see people trying something new and potentially failing. Um, I think people don't really care about your failures. Honestly, they're people love to gossip, and so if if the thing that you want to do aligns with what you've discovered using the three method or whatever other method, if you enjoy it, you're passionate about it, and it's spiritually rewarding, then what's someone going to say that's going to deter you? Like, there's really not much. It's like, I'm on my own path. You have to accept that you're on your own path, and that you're going to try for 4 years and probably nothing's going to happen. Like, nothing that's going to be really good, or at least your life isn't going to dramatically change within the first 4 years. It can, but I'd rather expect that nothing good is going to happen and that it's just like a boot camp or like a learning period, and put the effort in, because for the most part, things don't happen quickly and you need to learn, iterate, try over and over, find out what you're actually good at. I've always been willing to share what is happening in my life with close friends and even like acquaintances. Like people don't even need to be close for me to just talk about what I'm experiencing in hopes that there's a lesson for them. So why not do that at scale on social and, potentially build an audience of like-minded people so that my opportunity increases, because as your connections are everything, and you can post on social media for free. So why not just talk about what you care about to attract people that are similar to you so that your opportunity to do cool things increases? That's what I think.
Love that. I guess like for me, personally, like you've definitely helped me by the whole thing of like moving and leaving like the small, I guess like the small town and moving to the big city. And I'm sure it's like one of the biggest lessons that we've both had, in the past year. Um, and yeah, you've obviously talked about it in your newsletter a lot as well. But what has that move from being a or being in a small town to the big city? What has that experience been like for you, good and bad?
Yeah, I think the first couple months I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is so cool. Everything's so new. It's crazy to me. It's a completely different lifestyle. Like, I was just taking it all in from like a very optimistic, like, what is this place? I can't believe I'm here kind of mentality. And then about 3 or 4 months in, reality kind of sunk in, and I was like, damn, I really miss my family. Like, I really miss um, seeing my brothers and my mom and my friends and my dad. Like, it really sunk in, and that was like a tough couple weeks where I just had to like process. I just had to like process through that this was a choice that I made, and did the benefits outweigh, these feelings of homesick, the homesickness, and I eventually came to the conclusion that it was like it's worth it to do something challenging for a couple of years so that your opportunities and experience as a human can grow. So, um, and even the last couple months, I kind of fell into like a normal routine where it wasn't like super exciting, um, which is kind of part of the course. Like, not everything in life is going to be super exciting. Everything is in waves. Everything's energy. So there's going to be some good times and there's going to be some bad times, and that's just how it is. And even some mundane times where it's like, I don't know, nothing really exciting happened for the last 2 months. That's just kind of how it is. Um, and maybe I'm more in control than I give myself credit for, and I am just I'm okay just doing nothing. Like, I'm perfectly happy not going out and having new experiences. So maybe that's something that I can, work on. Um, but even the last couple months, I'm like, man, is it worth it to be in the city? And especially as I'm going into the new year and I've set my intentions, it's like, not everyone lives in New York City. Like, New York City is its own unique um, differentiator of like, I make content, so if I live in New York City and I make content, that's automatically putting me at an advantage of someone that doesn't live in New York, because a lot of people like to see what's happening in New York, or like the wild things that you see or the opportunities that you have. So if I just document that kind of stuff, then it's already worth it to stay here for, and however long. Like, I'll probably be here for many years. um, so that's kind of like, it's a constant thing of like, is New York really worth it? Am I taking full advantage of the unique benefits of New York that I have? Because even just visiting Weberville, it's like super slow. It's really like, but it was nice though. It was super nice to just be around family, like not really have much going on. But you don't want that for a super extended period of time, because then you're just kind of like, you know, you're not living life to what you could live it. So, um, yeah, I'm even right now, I'm looking for like a new location to live. I've been living in Hudson Yards, and now I'm kind of like, it's exciting to see what, what could Brooklyn have? Because over here you're either trading location or space in New York. So I've traded location for space. Like, the apartment's super small, but it's right next to the office, which has been nice. But now I'm kind of like, I could go with a little bit more space and a longer commute back to the island. So um, it's kind of exciting to see what more natural light and space I can have out in Brooklyn. Because it's a big difference, Ben. It's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, it's actually one of the things is like on the top of my to do list for next year is to relocate and find somewhere just a bit better. Just like better value for money and everything else in between. So,
And
yeah,
the new opportunities that could come with that. Like it's a whole different location. There's uh, potentially different types of people that you're around, different like shops that the neighborhood really cares about. So it's like new opportunity. I think new opportunity and like a chance to explore is fun. That's exciting to me personally.
for sure. And I guess that was probably part of your why behind moving originally. And I guess in those moments where maybe you do have doubt or like you're questioning it, I guess maybe naturally after some time processing, you kind of fall back on your why, and then it's like, this is why I'm doing it.
That's a good point, and that's probably with everyone listening too. They kind of like if you know your why, you can always kind of lean back on it. Um, because you have to. It's easy to lose sight and get lost in the mundane of working a job, or if you're self-employed, just the grind of like bearing all that risk. Um, but if you can lean back on your why of doing it, that's like a super big motivator.
Sure. Um, what advice do you have for anyone listening who is thinking of moving, like somewhere else, maybe to the big city, but they feel stuck?
I am not 100% sure. I think in life there's always opportunities for uh, a leap, a leap of faith. Um, and I think everyone's experience, whether you know it or not, you've experienced leaps of faith. That could look like getting a new job, quitting an old job that you had, um, going to a different school, or like choosing to go to college that's an hour away. Like that's a leap of faith, especially if you've lived with your parents and siblings. Um, I think there's always opportunities for leaps of faith, and if you really sit down and think about the pros and cons, like list it out. I can't stress how good like listing pros and cons are and like writing things down because it forces you to really think about the angles. Um, and that's with no music and no Instagram. Like just put noise canceling headphones on, even put some like 432 hertz frequency, like Zen, like just white noise kind of stuff, and just go to work on what's the pros and cons. Um, I wrote something, and I'll wrap this part up with I wrote something in a newsletter. I wrote it in just a journal that I had um, when I was like really questioning what am I doing out here in New York. This was like the third and fourth month, or first through third. At some point, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, is this worth it? And I wrote down like I didn't leave all my friends, family, belongings behind to blend in as like someone working a job. Like I really came here to push against my limiting beliefs, challenge myself, and draw outside the lines of my comfort zone. And if you're able to identify something like that, then that's a pretty strong, you know, that's a pretty strong why of like I can do this. Like I can accept the challenges that come. Um, if I can identify specific opportunities that excite me. And in my case, it was working, at one of Gary's companies that I had always known that I wanted to work for, and to feel that in person. So that was kind of a no brainer. Um, but don't out don't like overstretch yourself financially or like time wise. Really, if you have the money, do it. If you don't have the money, like try and just work your way in, and then work so that you can save up enough money so that you can do it. Like it's definitely tough, especially in New York, to ball on a budget. It's very difficult because especially if you have friends, they're going to want to go out to a bar, and that's like $100 just right there on a couple of drinks and some food. So you have to be smart. But if it's like one of these trendy new places like Austin, Texas, or if the cost analysis works, then just take the leap of faith because you can always move back. For the most part, most people can move back to wherever they originated from with a friend, family member, parents. Especially if we're young, especially if this person is young like us, like you can just move back with your parents for a year. You're gonna save a lot of money. Like sometimes I'm like, man, it'd be nice to move back with mom and dad just for a short amount of time and just stack up, a little bit so that financially it'd be easier. You can always go back.
I can definitely resonate with that heavily. I feel like London and New York are pretty similar in terms of expense, and um, yeah, when I was at home, I was saving a lot and investing it elsewhere, and now in London, I'm like, it's kind of getting by. I'm not
Yeah,
really making anything, but
yeah.
it's fine. Um, it's funny. There's actually like two things that stuck out to me around this like whole topic of moving, and the first one came probably when you moved from your newsletter, and it was basically you said something along the lines of like you're one person away from changing the trajectory of your life. Like that really resonated with me. And then the second one was our conversation, VCon, and you said you can always
Mhm.
go back,
Yeah.
and like that's just like stuck with me. And like at the time, it was such an unlocking. It was like a weight off my shoulders because I before then I'd felt like I was in this like limbo and I was like stuck. But like when you said that, like it took the weight off the decision, and then at that point it's like, well, you got nothing to lose, um,
Are you
especially at
happy with
our
your
age.
decision so far?
I don't regret it. So, like, naturally, things can always be better. I will say that there's been some, opportunities. Maybe it's like meeting new people or like going, having like an experience or an event or like, meeting new people that definitely wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been in London. So, I'm grateful to have had those experiences. Um, and it just like opens your eyes, I think, to like for wider, like I guess like to life in general and just people in general. And like naturally, if you like stay in the same place where you're born and raised your whole life, like great. Obviously, you have to do what's right for you, but um, it's like thing of like if you never step outside your comfort zone or your bubble, well, you're never gonna know. Um, and some people are like happy to be comfortable, and like that's completely fine. But if you do think that you maybe want to give it a go, then you're only going to know by trying, right? And as you said, you can always go back. So, um, yeah, that's been my experience.
And how many months are you in?
About 4 5 months, 4 5 months in.
Yeah, that about checks out with my experience too. Like it's even my friend he just moved from Michigan. He moved like 6 months before I did, and I was a couple of months into the New York experience. And I'm like, hey man, like you moved from Michigan, very similar. Like, how are you feeling right now? He's like, yeah man, it's great. Like this is the best decision I've ever made. And I'm like, well, I'm not really feeling that way. Like, how long did it take you? What did you do? He's like, honestly, man, it took me like 6 months to get settled in. Um, and then like really just comfortable um, to like take advantage of the opportunities, basically.
and it's like, and like for me as well, like it's not necessarily. I see it as like a permanent decision. Like it's not like a forever decision. It's like a in this period of my life, this stage of my life, it feels like the right thing to do. But I'm sure at the same time there'll come a time where maybe I want to settle down a bit more. Maybe I want to have a family. Probably there's a chance I wouldn't necessarily choose the big major city as a place to do that potentially. And then I can go a bit more to my roots or somewhere in between and find a happy medium. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. There's going back on the you're one person away from what was the quote again? I was the one
it's
that said
like
it.
you're one person away from changing the trajectory of your life.
Yes. So I it's so poetic because this that was said during an interview with a writer from 137. So John Tory interviewed me for 137 because they wanted a piece about someone who had gone quit their job and gone full time into crypto. And so I had ha- happened to reach out to him, or he had reached out to me, and we did an interview. And that's what I said during the interview with John Tory, one of the writers at 137. And then it was published, and it was I was like, I can't believe I'm featured in an article at 137. Like, this is crazy. This is one of Gary's companies. Um, and I had gotten there just by like sharing my interest and just trying to find ways to give value to people for free. And that's a classic Garyism, but it works. Like it's true. Like just share your interest online for free. You can figure out a way to monetize later, and just talk about what you're passionate about. So that's what I did to get into this opportunity. And then I said that you're one person away from changing your life's trajectory. And then about a year later, John Tory hooks me up with an interview to work at 137. So it like does not get more poetic than that, and that is one of the many, but one of the main reasons that I'm here in the office, working at VeeFriends now. It's like you really, if you, and I'm not like a natural networker, like, or at least I don't think of myself as someone like, oh, hey, how are you? You know, my name is this, I do this. Like, I just talk about what I'm interested in, and it's a take it or leave it kind of thing. Like, if you connect with what I'm saying, that's awesome. Let's keep talking. If you don't, then that's fine. Like, that's totally cool. So I think if that's kind of what makes it easy to post on social as well. Like, if you can adopt that mentality, it's like, if you agree with this and connect with it, awesome. Let's keep talking. If you don't, then enjoy your time. Like, we don't have to have a dialogue, if we don't, if we both aren't pumped about talking. So, it's huge. So I don't see myself as a natural networker, but it's true that connections are everything. And if you just talk about your passions, then you're good to go. Give it enough time. Let serendipity and let time cook. Let it cook, and you'll be good.
Amazing.
I feel like this is a TED talk right now. It's
Yeah,
good.
there's
I'm excited.
a massive like stage, and yeah, um, yeah. I used to watch those quite a bit back in the day. You obviously mentioned it quite a few times of, I guess, achieving that lifelong goal of working for Gary. In that moment, what was running through your mind?
I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Was the thing that went through my mind.
How long had that been a goal for?
Since I like saw Gary's stuff from like late 2017, I was watching the Daily V's, and I just had a sense. I'm like, man, one day I'm going to work for him. Like, this is what I want to. This is the type of energy that I want to surround myself with, and I know that I'm going to get there. Like, it wasn't a question. Like,
So it's like 5 year goal.
basically, yeah. I mean, it about 5 years for that to happen. Yeah.
Was it met with like because like personally I've had it where, I was in my old job, and probably for about 3 years I knew that it wasn't right for me, and it was like I just want to get out, be happy, do something else. And then like after that 3 years had ended and like things changed, it was like a light switch moment where all of a sudden like the weight that had been on me for so long had just been like lifted. And um like so that was like, I guess, like a blessing almost, right? But then it was like that was great for probably a week or two, and then it was shortly met after that with now what? Because like the thing that I'd been chasing for like years, then like it's all of a sudden like I've achieved it, and then I was like, well, what do I do now?
100%. That was it hit me like a couple months later. It was probably like 6 months, and I'm like, all right, I'm working remote. I'm still living in Michigan. I'm, working on a Twitter account, which is awesome. It's presented opportunities, but I'm not living in the city that like they're hosting events, that I could be going to and have like connections that I've made online be there. Um, it's really funny because when I got the job interview, I had just broken my ankle. Like, that's the first bone that I broke. I broke it skateboarding. Um, I was at like I was at a really low point because I didn't have a job for the last like 7 months. Um, I was fortunate enough to make some moves in crypto, and so I was able to just sell off some crypto as needed for those 7 months. But I was quickly running out, and I just didn't feel great about myself because I hadn't made much progress towards really much of any goal. I was kind of just hanging out, watching movies, doing some writing and content here and there, but I wasn't as poignant and you know um, I wasn't as pointed in my effort as I could have been. So I was really at a low point, and then I broke my ankle. And it's so funny because I told my brother, we were at the skate park, and he was like, "Hey man, like, let's get." It was the first nice spring day of that year, and he was like, "Hey man, let's get out of here. Like, I'm kind of hungry." And I'm like, "No, no, one more, just one more." That's always how it happens at the skate park. I'm like, I did one more, went up, turned, fell, snapped my ankle, and I was like, "Oh no!" Like, it hurt really bad. And some kid, one of the better kids at the skate park, he was really good. He saw it and he just went, "Oh, mama!" I remember in pain, lying on my back, and I just hear, "Oh, mama." I'm like, man, if he's saying that, if he said that, this is not good. I think I broke my ankle. On the way to the Ready Care, which, by the way, if you have a broken ankle, go to the hospital. Don't go to Ready Care. But on the way to Ready Care, I told my brother, I'm like, I think that this was meant to happen. Like, I really think I was supposed to go through all of this like low point and then hit rock bottom, because I couldn't, like, with the crutches and my broken foot, like I couldn't make a sandwich and bring it to the table. Like I had to have help to literally eat. Um, and so that was really, really a low point. And then around that time, that weekend, I was at my mom's house, and I was like laid up on the couch, and I got the job interview that day. And Gary had retweeted something that I tweeted, and then Tyler Schmidt, who was running 137, emailed me like, "Hey, let's talk on Monday." And I was laying in the couch with my ankle up, and Gary retweeted my thing and my phone was just going off. And I'm like, Mom, this is what fame looks like. I'm laid up on the couch. So I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason, even though sometimes it's hard to believe, and to feel that in the present moment. But I, even if things don't happen for a reason, I would much rather think that it does. Like it just feel, if you think that things are going to work out, in my mind, not to a sense of delusion, but I would much rather approach a situation of uncertainty by thinking that it's going to work out. Um, just easier to handle. So um, there have definitely been ups and downs with the GaryVee journey, and I think I'm discovering what I do want to do. Like for a year or so, I was like, okay, I hit my main goal, just like you. Like you hit your goal that you'd set out for so long. Now what? And I haven't been 100% sure of the now what. Like I know that I'm going to work hard. I'm going to, try and increase my connections, do a better job so that I can learn, so that I can do whatever, wherever my life takes me, I can use these skills. Um, and yeah, it might take a while. If you, Ben, or the listener are looking for what you want to do, like it might take a while to unravel, but if you just like continue to move forward, make some sort of progress every day. Some days you won't make progress, but just keep trying, and eventually it'll kind of unfold and make more sense.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I like the mentality of things. Most things happen for a reason. Occasionally, something will happen. You'll be like, "What? Like, why?"
Yeah,
But
yeah,
there's always
yeah.
the anomaly. But in general, rule of thumb, most things happen for a reason. Or at least that's what I've found from my experience as well. Okay, final question. What would you like your legacy to be?
I want to leave. This might be cheesy, and it's probably evolved. Um, I wrote down like I want to leave a wake of happiness behind me. Is basically what it is. Um, I want to be helpful and people understanding that if you that you're in control of your life and you can do what you set out to. I know that there's a lot of like help gurus and like mindset gurus. Like that's not what I want to do. I want to share what I'm interested in, and because what I'm interested in is like moving my life forward, and then basically taking people along with me that want to participate and learn alongside me. So as of now, that's a legacy that I want to have. When I have a family, I'm sure that that will evolve, and it'll be like teaching my kids the lessons, teaching my kids the lessons that I learned, so that they can handle, whatever comes their way. Um, and so I'm kind of just doing that with anyone who will listen to the newsletter and see my Instagram. Is like I just want to share what I'm interested in, share the lessons that I have, so that people can like be better versions of themselves. Not that I know everything, but I know what I've learned, and I can at least share that part. In a um, yeah, that's the gist of it. That's what I've come to understand as of now.
I like that. That's good. Okay. Well,
What do you know your legacy? Do you know what you would like to?
oh
Um,
damn. I
achieve?
was not prepared for this. You've played like the full like Uno reverse card,
Yeah.
and now I'm just like,
What about like in the next year? Like, what are your intentions? Do you have any, you know,
It's actually the intentions thing I can definitely answer because I actually done the whole thing of like writing questions down earlier of what I achieved this year and like just kind of I guess overall review of this year and then intentions for next year. And I think for me personally, it's continuing to connect with like-minded individuals. That's like a big one for me. And like especially after like going to VCon, I've had this like going there makes me feel like I'm going into a room with like quote unquote my people. Like I feel like this is my tribe. This is where I'm meant to be almost. So connecting with more people for sure. Fitness is something that I've started putting more, I guess, focus on, and it's something I want to continue to be consistent at. And then wanting to put myself out there more, and hopefully the podcast will be the platform that allows me to do that. Just because it comes with, I guess like that's like one thing where I can connect with people that I want to connect with, but then also, it will ultimately lead to like opportunities down the line or whatever it is, and it's just the way I want to communicate. And like you say, people that follow you for whatever reason, hopefully there's some value that can be had if something I say or something you say, and if someone in that sentence gets value from that, and then that inspires them in their own life, and can have a positive impact on them, and maybe they decide to move somewhere or something else, then it's worthwhile doing. So that's kind of maybe the intentions and the legacy kind of a little bit
yeah,
interwoven into one.
I could say that as your first guest, and like you said, I'm generally pretty public, so the research might have been easy, but I feel that this was a great use of my time personally, and hopefully a great use of the audience's time. And you're doing it proper. Like it's clear to me when people do things that are proper. You've done the research part and the execution of it, and now arguably the most important part, or at least tied for the most important part, is how it appears on social. So it's now in your hands, because if you can do that part proper, like you already have the formula of having a great podcast. Get the social aspect right by posting clips, post the whole thing onto, Spotify, yada, yada. People mainly consume on TikTok and all that. Um, if you're able to do that and then you give it like 5 years, this curiosity corner could be something real, something very meaningful for you and for the audience that watches it. So, um, yeah, hopefully we can clip that in 5 years when it is, and then it's like, hell yeah. You're like, I did it.
Hopefully, that's the plan. Well, I won't take any more of your time. Thank you for the open and honest conversation. And if anyone listening, this is the first time hearing about Ezra, then make sure to follow him at Ezra with a camera on Twitter/X and Instagram. And definitely make sure, if you want to follow him even closer, to check out the Bleeding Edge newsletter every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. So, yeah, much love. Thank you very much.
Much love, Ben. Thank you. And thank you to the listeners. Hopefully you learned something.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us, to leave a review, and connect with us on our socials.